Hi, this is Carmen, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the eighth house in death, in resurrection, and rebirth. I've been wanting to do this video for a while. I'm going to do it on my cell phone, which I don't know how well it's going to turn out. The past few months, there have been a lot of things happen and in my life and to those around me. I've lost a few friends, I lost a few people recently, and it kind of brought up the reason that I started researching the eighth house in the first place. And so I wanted to do a quick video. This is part one, and I will have part two that will come after this, but I wanted to do a quick video tonight because I felt inspired to do so. So first of all, just so you know a little bit about me, when I'd say I became a social worker. I think I was 19 when I graduated from college, and worked a lot with teenagers, runaway teens, children that were abused, adopted children, adoption preservation. Worked a lot with runaway teens, going to police stations. I was on call, did home visits, things like that. So I was always very sensitive to energy, as an eighth house person. I have my moon, Chiron, and Jupiter in the eighth house. So what kind of led me to becoming a social worker is really what the eighth house is about. And when I was 16 years old, I had never known anyone that had died. So I never lost anyone, didn't know what death was about. Was kind of sheltered in a way, never really had that experience of grief and going to a funeral and all of the things and all of the taboo energies that surround that process, and how a lot of people don't know what to say to you, don't know what to do. So how it all started was I had a friend. We were 16 years old. I was getting ready to be a senior in high school. She was going to be a sophomore. And we were hanging out a lot that summer, doing a lot of things together. And she, told me she wanted to hang out with me more, when we became seniors. And she stayed the night at my house, and she had left her green hair ribbon at my house that night. And the next night, something kind of strange happened. I worked at a ballpark, at a batting cage in a concession stand. So I did the softball, kept score for softball games and things like that, and worked at a concession stand. And she was there that night, and something was strange about her. I don't know, I had a strange feeling, and I can't explain it now. I didn't know what it was at the time. I was 16. So a lot of life has been lived now, but looking back, something was off. And I watched her. I remember seeing her from a distance playing catch with another boy that went to high school with us. And I watched her, and something bothered me. And I remember it was like a slow motion, just watching her from a distance. And I went home that night, and I came into work the next day, and no one was there. All the soccer games were canceled, and I didn't know what was going on. And I'm like, where's everybody? And this kid came up and said, my friend's name, that she had died that night. And I said, no, there's no way. Yeah, she died. She died last night. I had no idea. So it was on the front page of the newspaper in our hometown. She had been accidentally shot. Some young boys in our town had got a gun and had been passing the gun around innocently. They had stolen this gun out of one of the boys' dad's trucks, and I guess this gun had passed around town for a couple weeks, and no one told any parents or anything, so no one knew about it. And one of the boys thought he took all the bullets out of the gun. Well, he didn't know there was still a bullet in the chamber. So he was in the back seat of the car, and my friend was in the driver's side. And the gun accidentally went off and went through the seat, through her heart, and it killed her pretty instantly. So that was the first person that I ever knew that died. And I took it really hard. At the time, I didn't know a lot about astrology. I probably didn't start really getting into astrology till I was about 17. About a year after this happened, I started getting astrology books and stuff like that, and then it made a little bit more sense when I looked at my chart and had all that 8th house and 12th house energy. But long story short, that experience led me to, wanting to become a social worker and helping others. And that's when I started researching the 8th house, and I realized that a lot of people with 8th house planets lose a loved one, lose someone close to them in their younger days. Sometimes it's a parent, a mother, father, grandparent, sister, brother, cousin, friend. And I started seeing this pattern. And it was so much so that I thought there is really something to this. And I want to help people, and I want to, validate my experiences. So I'm going to show you guys a picture that I saw in my mind. This was supposed to be the cover of my first book, The Mysteries of the 8th House, Phoenix Rising. And if you look closely at I had a friend of mine paint this for me. And that's my friend's tombstone. And then there's the Phoenix rising out of the ashes. And then this constellation of Scorpio up there. And then the symbol of Pluto. He's holding in his hand, as you can see, the planet of death and resurrection, the planet that rules the 8th house. And the Grim Reaper, of course, holding the chalice, and the full moon in the background. So this was supposed to be the cover of my first book. But because it was painted, I had a hard time trying to figure out how to get it on the cover. So what I started doing was, at the time, I wrote an article in 2005. And the article was titled The Mysteries of the 8th House, House of Death and Resurrection. And I published it online. And back then, the internet was just kind of starting off. It wasn't, we just had started getting cell phones, and Facebook wasn't even around yet. So things were, still kind of in the Stone Ages, so to speak, with technology. But I published that article, and I had people email me from all over the world telling me that article was them, and I was like talking, through their head, and hard, and just explaining some of their experiences in that book, which a lot of in the article, and a lot of the experiences in that article were my own. And so I started collecting people's stories, and they would reach out to me, and I decided to write a book about the 8th house and some of my own experiences with death and with grieving and with loss, and also sharing stories. I wanted to, got permission from some people that had wrote me, and, asked them if I could share their story in my book. So this is my first book that I wrote about death in the 8th house, the mysteries of the 8th house, House of Death and Transformation, Phoenix Rising. And this is the cover. You can see the phoenix bird. I had my friend design this instead. He's the same one that painted the painting for me. But this book started off from an article that I wrote about my own experiences, and it just expanded into a lot more of my experiences, but also those of others. Some experiences in the book are mine, but I didn't list them as mine. So that book was really a healing for me at the time. It really was. And if I could rewind a little bit, so after my friend was killed, that year I was a senior, and I had an unexplained experience happen to me. After this experience is when I became more spiritual, and when I started researching astrology and Edgar Cayce and energy and all of this stuff, and of course psychology and Carl Jung and dreams. I've always been a dreamer, so I've always wrote my dreams down since I was 16, even before this strange experience that I had. But in my book, in the book, I share an experience about a glowing ball of light in my doorway. I woke up one night and I was frozen. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream, I couldn't yell. And my door was open. Our house was pretty small, and I looked out into my door sill, and there was a glowing ball of yellow light in my doorway, floating there. And I knew I was awake. I kept closing my eyes, opening them, and then I was scared because I couldn't move. I couldn't yell out for my mother, who was across the hall. And so I laid there for hours, watched it. And the only thing I had control of was my mind. And I remember just saying, please don't have it come my room. Please don't have it come my room, over and over again. And it never did. I lay there for hours watching this thing. And finally, I was able to yell out my mom's name. I screamed, and I had a voice. Finally, after hours, I said, look in my doorway. Do you see it? She said, yes. So my mother saw the glowing orb, the glowing ball of light in my doorway. It was bigger than a softball. It was yellow, kind of watery, translucent, and it was floating there in midair, and it would leave and come back and float in my doorway. So after that experience, that was the same year my friend was killed. After that experience, I had a lot more experiences that I couldn't explain, which some of them are in my book. If you haven't read my book, some of them are in my book. Some of them I talk about in my videos, also my other videos. But I just wanted to talk to you tonight about death. And, death is an ending. And it's very when someone dies, you just feel shocked. You feel just caught off guard. And the more I lose people, the more I change. The first time it happened, I cried so much. I was so devastated. And this past 2 months, the reason I'm doing this video, part one, is because I've lost some people. A friend of mine that I went to college with, we were great friends. She came and visited me in Germany when I was living over there with the Air Force. She came and visited me a lot. In end of February, I was traveling for work, and my old friend from college called and said she watched the news and she thought that our friend was the victim that was on the news of a shooting. And I just couldn't believe it. I said, there's no way. It's not her. I got back from my trip. She texted me and said that they finally released who it was, and it was my friend. She worked at a community center in St. Louis, Missouri, and one of the janitors that worked there, I think he was fired that night. I don't know where he got the gun, but he walked up to the front counter and he shot my friend, killed her instantly. And then he paced back and forth. Well, people were working out. It was a community center, so there were children in there. There was about 150 people in this community center. And there was an off-duty cop that came in and started trying to help, and they got in a gunfight. But he saved everybody that night. No one else got hurt, but my friend was killed, shot and killed. So I was preparing to go to her memorial the 1st of March, and then her father died within a week of her death because he was so heartbroken. So she had lived with her dad and took care of him. So I went to this double memorial. It was a beautiful ceremony in St. Louis, Missouri for my old college friend. During the COVID-19 just started up, so they wouldn't let us shake hands or hug, and it was like, stay 6 feet apart kind of thing. But it was a beautiful church in St. Louis, beautiful ceremony. So that happened. And then this weekend, I lost a colleague and a dear friend, a coworker that I've known for 2 years. She had a brain aneurysm and had to have emergency brain surgery Friday night. And then she ended up not making it. So she passed away this morning. She was on life support for a day or two. And so she is now gone. And that really made me realize, I need to do more 8th house videos. And I need to talk more about resiliency and more about healing and more about healthy grief, and try to give you some, first of all, explain some of my personal experiences to you So you know why I'm so obsessed with the 8th house and why I do these videos, and I have an 8th house astrology group on Facebook. It's because I've had a lot of 8th house experiences. These are just a few. I've had a lot of very intense, traumatic things happen to people that I know, and which have impacted me greatly and affected my life. So I want to help people to heal and to grieve, and to not be afraid of death, because, you know, death is inevitable. You know, we're all going to die at some point, and every day I wake up, I say, you know, I'm living for the day. I try to live in the present moment because we don't know if we're going to have tomorrow or the future. And each day I try to help others or do something to try to inspire or touch someone's life or try to be positive. And because you never know what's going to happen day to day, but we tend to live in the future and live in you know, what's happening tomorrow, and we don't really be present and appreciate our loved ones and those that are around us and our family. And you know, we get so sucked into work and paying the bills and all of these practical things. But as 8th housers, you know, we are deep, and we have our own deep traumatic, you know, 8th house experiences that affect us. And we also attract others that have a lot of pain and wounds and need healing. And that can overwhelm us, you know, as 8th house people, hearing so many negative stories, hearing, you know, so many losses and people dying and people losing loved ones, and just really sad, horrible stories. But as 8th housers, we are the only ones capable of being strong enough to handle our own change and our own grief, and we also can help others. And we just have this energy about us, 8th housers do, that understand death. We understand the cycle of life. You know, there really is no such thing as death. You know, death is just a transition into the next realm. You know, we all have different beliefs about what happens after we die. But what I believe is that it's not the end. You know, it's not it. And that gives me hope, and that gives me faith. And I just want to say that, you know, you're not alone as people with 8th house planets. All those experiences that you've had, those people that you've lost, your loved ones that you've lost, they're still with you in spirit. And those life experiences that you went through and the loss helps you to understand other people's suffering and other people's loss and pain, and you're just a steady, grounded influence in a lot of people's lives. 8th house people, just your energy, people feel so comfortable talking to you and telling you all their problems, and being vulnerable, and maybe even crying and telling you things. You know, I had several people call me over the weekend just in tears, just absolutely devastated and crying, and I didn't cry. I was strong. I listened, and I felt so bad. I felt their pain, but I'm able to listen, and that's the gift of people with 8th house planets. When someone dies or someone loses someone, we are able to understand it, and we're able to be calm, and we're very good in crisis, and we're natural when there's a crisis, and that's one of our gifts. So I just wanted to start off by, you know, addressing you, saying hi. I haven't done a video in a while, but this is part 1, and I will be back for part 2, where I'm going to share a little bit more experiences that I've had, and those of some other 8th housers that have opened up to me. And I will be back real soon. Thank you.